But anyway, back to all things Warhammer, because Grumps, he posted on X earlier today. Games Workshop Warhammer lies about custodes and retcons lore, gender flipping them in the new 10th edition codex for woke points. So, Arch, tell us, what is this all about? What is Games Workshop doing now?
Well, this was inevitable, in essence. Games Workshop has been having demands for female Space Marines for a very long time. They have resisted these calls for a very long time, and this is their roundabout way of introducing them without actually introducing them. Because the sliver of justification that has been used, not by GW, but by the other people, is that the custodies were never specifically stated to be male. This is incorrect. They have always been stated to be male, and there has never been female custodies up until this point. They have now introduced them, but far more interestingly, because doing it was, again, inevitable. They were going to have to bend the knee. BlackRock and Vanguard owns like 11% of their company combined. This was going to happen. But what is interesting is that they didn't just go out and say, okay, we're retconning the law, we're changing it, there are female custodies now. Instead, they're saying that there have always been female custodies, which is some real 1984 level shit.
I believe this is the BlackRock and Vanguard way. So instead of saying that now we're changing it now, what was before was problematic, they're saying, no. It was always this way. We have now officially rewritten the past.
Yes, and this is actually something that has been not very well received even by the supporters of the idea of female Space Marines, because at the very least, if they would go out and say, okay, we changed it, it wasn't very inclusive, blah, 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 at least they would have the courage of their convictions, right? Whereas here, they're not even doing that. They're simply lying openly that their law has always been thus. But again, this is a very a fan-heavy setting. Nobody is unaware or that this is a lie. And so they're kind of doing the both worst English, Jesus Christ, worst of both worlds. There we go. And I think it's actually very easy to explain this. Although you have to use progressivist logic to explain it, so easy.
Yeah, well, let's try to get into the mindset.
Basically, if Games Workshop were to agree that they had simply just changed it, that would be them admitting they're bad people. Because if you have exclusivity, if you have all-female factions or even all-male factions, that's bad. And thus, if you accept that, now you're bad. And your opposition, or in this case, the allies for the left, will simply continue to berate you for this forever. But if you say, no, we were never bad people, we were always good people, well, the left aren't going to call them on their lie because they've already weaponized hypocrisy. Honesty and truth are not values that they hold very dearly or highly. And so for them to lie actually makes a lot more sense than being honest. This is the exact same reason why we're tearing down statues. You must eradicate the past, not merely change it.
Well, we have a special guest joining us now. Perfect timing, because we're talking about his tweet. Welcome back, Grums. How you doing?
Hey,
I'm doing good. How are
Grums, I don't know if
you?
you've met Arch before, but if not, it's my pleasure to introduce you.
Oh, I've watched Arch's videos before. Happy to meet you.
Happy to meet you too. I think this is the first time we're speaking.
Yes, it is.
We love
I'm
bringing
afraid
people
Grums has
together.
become too controversial. I don't know if I can stay on this panel.
Have you guys seen Chato's chats? You talk about controversial, Jesus.
Yeah, we do attract controversy here, one way or the other.
Yeah, a little bit. Welcome, Grums.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And boy, what is happening in 40K? Is that what you guys are talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, we are, and Arch is something of an expert in this topic. And
do you still play Arch?
The nearest Games Workshop is 2 hours drive away from me, so it's been quite some time since I played proper tabletop. I used to have a friend group around here, but life, people move away, get husbands, wives, terrible things.
You know, for me, it was I think the oversimplification of the rules. And when Horus Heresy came out, it was a little more of the old school flavor. I really started to get into that, but I was planning a game with my son, but we haven't started yet.
What? 40K players actually have relationships with the opposite sex? What?
Yeah, we're not actually incels.
Oh, wow.
Damn it, Paul, we can't take you anywhere.
Because when I was playing D&D, I guarantee you there wasn't a lot of deodorant use around.
Yeah, but that's D&D. Warhammer is different.
I never played 40K Warhammer.
And you're not packed around the table as closely in Warhammer, so it's better.
Okay. Okay, I only played D&D.
Yeah, well, there's a problem right there, evidently. So yeah, but before we let Arch continue, because he had a brilliant takedown of the mindset of Games Workshop, which of course he argued is influenced by its owners, around like 7-8% of which are you know the usual ones, BlackRock, Vanguard, those kinds of people. But take us through us since we
and Bailey Gifford. Don't forget Bailey Gifford. Combined,
exactly.
It's a quarter of the outstanding shares, which is huge for a public company.
Yeah, let's hear your take on this.
No, let's hear it, Arch.
Well, Arch, carry on.
Back to me again. Okay, but yeah, no, they're a big part is that's the reason why they lied, as I just said, right? They must change the past, otherwise they will forever be bad people. As to why they changed it, it literally is just to take away things. That is the core of it. It is demoralization, and it is claiming something. Because I want to point out now, Games Workshop is probably the closest thing that Great Britain has to a major cultural institution. Like, they are the much smaller Disney equivalent of Great Britain. I mean, what else is there in Great Britain? Like, what, the BBC? There just isn't a whole lot. And Games Workshop is a very large company now. Oh, Doctor Who.
But we see what saw what happened to that.
Yeah, we see what happened to that. And so obviously this is an institution that is ripe for takeover because it has enormous social influence. Like, it's spreading across the world. It has hundreds of stores, all of which are considered brand ambassadors. It has a lot of marketing potential. It's getting into a deal with Amazon to create entertainment. It's the perfect in for the progressives to begin pushing their agenda into a brand new and relatively unknown series. It could be the first step in proper normalization, where the next generation of normies see this thing and go, hey, what's this? Oh, it's woke too? I guess it's just normal now. So it's an enormous win for them. And as for GW, well, it was inevitable. They're headquartered in Nottingham, a very progressive British city. As Grumps pointed out, they have an enormous portion of their company owned by very progressive companies. And again, it's not even about the percentage, right? BlackRock and Vanguard control trillions. When these companies tell a company to jump, they ask how high.
Oh, they absolutely do. And there is a couple ways they wield influence. One is when they're direct shareholders. And I have this info from C-level and studio lead execs in the industry, in the video game industry. When they have direct ownership, they exert that direct ownership. They talk to management. They have access to the CEO, access to the C-level suite, and they definitely push it there. The other way they do it is because it's through fund managers. They're able, because of their large investments in funds, they're able to exert pressure on fund managers, which all the normies buy into, you know, like your 401k, all that stuff, to push this stuff. So it's really a multi-pronged push. And there's a company that people aren't talking too much about yet, which is at the top of the ownership of Games Workshop, which is Bailey Gifford. And I'll go ahead and I'll post the link into chat here so you guys could pull it up if you want. But they're an investment firm that's all about finding companies to drive change. And if you look at their values and some of the stuff I posted, they're very much about pushing DEI and ESG. I think over there they call it D and I, so it's a little bit different in acronym, but it's completely the same mindset. There is financial pressure to do this, and it, for whatever reason, these companies are wielding vast amounts of money, and they're focused on media, Hollywood, and games, because they understand that a cultural shift is what drives this. And they understand what a useful arm of propaganda games and tabletop games and movies can be.
Absolutely. And this all comes back because you've got to go back to the 30s and the 40s to fully explore this, with the idea of cultural capture, where they are actively building a separate and different political ecosystem to replace the normal. Like, I'm not going to go full Gramscian here because it's going to take an hour or so, but this is all the same narrative and the same plan. Like, this is why I keep also saying that this is malicious, right? Because even if the people at Games Workshop probably have no idea why this is so important, why this is so political, there are a bunch of middle management individuals from ye old England. But this is absolutely a combined, unified effort that comes at a very high level and has very deep roots.
The issue is not the investment in the company itself. The issue is that these organizations like BlackRock, and I guess this organization you're talking about, which I've never heard of, have managed to equate...
Bale, Gifford, I have to do research on these ones. They're new to me as well, but sorry, carry on.
No problem. To me, not to me, what they've managed to do is equate companies that have not adopted ESG and DEI as if they were tobacco merchants. So if you're running a massive mutual fund for the teachers union or something like that, we're talking about trillions of dollars worth of money that you are investing in all over the place. You now have governance issues where you say, we're not going to buy any stock or any company or any mutual fund, because they invest in composite funds also, that have a oil component or a child labor component. These companies have successfully now equated companies that don't have DEI as being child murderers. And so the big institutional investors are going, well, if they're not ESG certified, we're not going to include them in our massive portfolio. That is really the power.
Yeah, it is indeed. And it's only getting worse with Bridge, because they're moving away from the DEI terminology, but just the terminology. They're readopting it into Bridge, which is even more comprehensive and even worse. But we'll get more into that in due time.
Can I ask a favor of all you 40K Warhammer people? As long as I've been gaming, tabletop, everything, I have never heard of 40K this thing, even though I'm a StarCraft guy, of which I understand StarCraft ripped off Warhammer. And I didn't hear about it until I think Cavill entered the fray. So for idiots like me, can you give me a summary? This is a tabletop game that is apparently one of the biggest entertainment enterprises in the UK. What?
Oh, yes. It's massive. In fact, I believe, let's see.
Give us a summary. Like, what is it and how did it become so massive? Like, I'm not understanding this.
I believe, there we go. Yes. Here, let me give you this in the chat here to give you an idea of just how big this is. The creator of Warhammer was knighted.
Wow.
That gives you a rough idea of how big this is for Britain, right?
Is it the figurines that you get to paint? Is that really the big issue? Is that the big thing?
The figurines you do get, they are gray. The figurines represent several different factions. You can then use rule sets in codexes to compete against each other in a tabletop war game. And they have a handful of different settings. Warhammer Fantasy, which is coming back after they killed it. Warhammer 40k, which is science fiction. And Age of Sigmar, which is Games Workshop decided to do anything and everything at the same time, and it's a mess.
Games Workshop is a tabletop miniature war game set in a grimdark universe. In fact, I think they invented the term grimdark in the first edition rules. Some of my fans are tweeting at me, and they have a market cap of 4.1 billion. So it's an outgrowth of military miniature war games, which used to be historical, and they went fantasy. The way to think about Games Workshop is they are a toy company. All right. So their job is to sell miniatures. That is the bulk of their business, and why they defend it so aggressively against the rise of 3D printing and everything else. And they often, they often change their rules with new editions and new codexes, which are the rule books for the different factions. And there's many different factions you can play. And there's vast armies of collectibles that if you were to build an army, you're probably looking at today's prices of around $1,000. Per person playing. And
really?
And unlike people will drop and not just 1,000. The whales and people buying like the Resin Forge World stuff and collecting more than one army will spend multiple thousands of dollars per year on this toy game, miniature game. I don't want to demean it as a toy game. It's an awesome game, right? It's probably got the richest lore of any IP that I know of, and it is it's an incredible story that's been built up over decades.
Right.
And their market cap, you can see here, is 4.1 billion, and compare that to Hasbro, which is 7.8 billion currently. So you can see that they are a very big toy and tabletop company that dominates the world. They are the #1 IP if you're into miniature gaming.
And to further point out the prices, this is one of the largest models they create. It costs £1,185.
Wow. I thought tabletop was a niche.
It was. Like, Games Workshop has also desperately been trying to go mainstream now for probably 15 years. And they've just always been so close, but never quite managed to break through. And now with the potential Amazon partnership with Henry Cavill, they are probably the closest they have ever come to going full mainstream.
Yeah.
You know what their biggest oof moment was in terms of taking this mainstream? Blizzard, in the early days, pitched them on doing a Warhammer fantasy game, and they turned them down. And so hence, the Warcraft universe for Blizzard was built in because they said we're gonna do it anyways, and Blizzard went ahead, and that was a huge missed opportunity for Games Workshop.
And StarCraft too, right?
Yeah, and StarCraft 2 is obviously the Warhammer 40k equivalent. So yeah, I mean, that really put Blizzard on the map. And there's a little copying going back and forth. People have accused Blizzard of copying Games Workshop, but then what's really funny is I remember when the new Tyranids came out after StarCraft, they were pretty much a copy of the Zerg faction in StarCraft. So we had a good laugh about that.
Yeah, and I would also like to point out one thing with reference to the screen grab we just saw about the market cap. I'm going to bring that back, just so that we can have a look at that again, because I thought it was really, really interesting. Because there's a point to be made about it. Because what we see here, when we look at that market cap, look at the time frame here. Because here it's like from 2000 to 2005, it's right here, couple of 100 million at most. And then look here, 2010 to 2005. Still a couple of 100 million, like 0.26 billion. And then 5 years later, 2020, it's up to 3 billion. Peaks at 5.5 billion in 2021. Something weird happens in in 2022, but then it's right back up to the trend here, to 4.8 billion as of 6 months ago. So if we then just look from 2015 till today, it's a steep rise upwards. Like it's a massive growth, and that signals it's grown massive among kind of like the genre audience that influences and drives the mass audience. And this is over the same period, and to me this is the interesting part. It has grown in the same period that Marvel, Star Wars, and everything else has declined by as much, which explains exactly what Arch was saying earlier, how this is a property that if nefarious people want to do their kind of influencing to it and try to rewrite it, as in certain characters in it have always been this way, although they clearly haven't. Now is the time to do that, because the people who would know that, just look at the market cap. Like it was like 200 million worth of people who knew that back in the day, whereas now it's 5 billion worth of people, many of whom don't necessarily know that, whom you can possibly trick and convince. And who knows where this thing might be in another 5 years from now, especially if the Amazon deal happens. This is exactly the kind of things that nasty companies like Bailey Gifford and BlackRock and Vanguard wants to get their hands into.
It'd be very interesting to see the timing of that, because they were starting to take off, looks like around 2017, and then obviously 2020 they shot way up. I mean, that's partially COVID effect, right?
Large parts COVID,
yeah. So
we actually know this from the Games Workshop earning reports. They have complained loudly about how COVID's a big problem, even as they report record online sales year after year.
So I know that at least in video games, 2019, 2020 is when BlackRock and the other funds, the DEI-based funds, started to move heavily into media. And that's when they, with strings attached, of course, and that is when they started pumping these stocks, because they started to have fund managers push them in portfolios and things like that. I bet you anything, if you look back, BlackRock became involved right around, looks like 2020 there. I would be very interested in the timing.
Probably, and because it's exactly correct as well, as you say. This is you correlate this to the fall of Star Wars and Marvel. Well, this was what was expected to be the replacement, and clearly some fund managers were intelligent enough to see that as well.
Yeah, I would say so, because the if we had a different graph here with the overlap of the fall of Star Wars and the fall of Marvel, it would overlap fairly nicely, because Marvel peaked in 2019, so there would be a pretty nice intersection point there, and Star Wars peaked in. Or that actually did peak in 2015 with the release of Rise of Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and everything since that has been like one long big chapter of sorrow. So yeah, that's very interesting observations. Arch, I'm curious, because we spoke about the future potential and to take it to the next level. And Henry Cavill has been working very hard with this Amazon series. Do you know any updates about that, or can you talk those who may not be aware of this series through its development, what's going on, and what kind of power does Henry Cavill have here? Because it seems he may be going against stronger and stronger forces that want the series to be a certain way.
Well, there is a lot of complications going on with this series, as there's a whole lot of rumors and counter rumor and etc. The latest news is that the contract, some form of contract, has been signed between Games Workshop and Amazon. And then this thing is too, this is a agreement in principle that has later on supposedly evolved into a full, actual, legally binding agreement, but nobody knows as to what. As the initial rumor was that GW, being overwhelmed by Amazonian star power, I guess, put forward a very terrible deal where Amazon would actually own whatever they produced. So if they made a hit TV show, they would own the characters, they would own the setting of the TV show, and everything related to it. Kind of like Lord of the Rings is separate from the books and the movies, right?
Yeah.
Which would have been disastrous for Games Workshop. They would literally have sold the keys to the kingdom if they did that. That presumably then had a whole bunch of renegotiations, which eventually ended in a deal that we don't know anything about yet. But Henry Cavill is, as far as we know, guaranteed to be partaking in it as one of the executive producers. So he has probably a fair bit of power, but it, of course, depends, because they could listen to him a lot, in which case I think it might actually be a good project. Or they could simply give him a title and then put him in a corner and run rings around him, because he is, at the end of the day, first and foremost, an actor rather than a director or producer.
I think one thing that's sustaining Games Workshop here, and you can see that their sales have been going up. Part of that is just massive price increases. They switched over from metal to plastics, and they greatly cut costs. And of course, at the time, they promised us all higher quality and lower prices, but it never happened.
I remember that, yes. I remember reading the article in which they said, like, oh, this will be cheaper for us and for you. Yeah.
Yeah, but instead, every 6 months or so, they raise the prices of their miniatures, and players continue to pay. And I think one thing is that the franchise has not gone full woke yet. You know, we're just seeing the beginnings of it. And I think that that is going to have a huge impact on them. So I think one reason you haven't seen any sort of like Marvel fatigue or anything like that is because they have not gone in that direction yet, but they clearly signaled that yesterday that this is where they're going.
They've been signaling it for a while. There was even an article where they denounced their highest-selling faction, the Space Marines, with the article being titled, "The Imperium is built on hate, but not Games Workshop," where they went into detail like how the Imperium was terrible, how the Space Marines were bad.
No,
all of this nonsense.
Everyone's bad in 40K. Everyone's bad. It's not any one faction. That is absolutely ridiculous that they have to come out and distance themselves.
But isn't that what's fun about a game like this? Is that everyone's bad and nasty? Isn't that the point?
Well, there's been this trend to make villains more human and relatable. You can't have evil anymore. And if you do have something evil in your creative IP, you as the company that authored that have to issue some sort of statement to distance yourself from it. It's almost like a trigger warning. In fact, if you look at what is it, Evil Hat games, they recently had the controversy with the Tomb Raider game that's coming out, saying that they're going to erase all the colonialism and not make it about raiding tombs anymore. They published another game,
fake artifacts from fake tombs.
They're truth seekers. Yes, I don't know if they're going to return the artifacts or what's going to happen, but they published another game, a Cthulhu game, and they had this whole trigger warning in the beginning of their rules where they had to distance themselves from H.P. Lovecraft because of the way he named his dog, which was very offensive. So
what's about this? Well, anyway, yeah. And for those wondering, it's a slur beginning with N. That's what he named his pet animal, whether it was a dog or a cat. I think it was a cat.
Oh yeah, it was a cat with a hard R, right? So yeah, they're you see this distancing of themselves from the source material that they're basing their products on. And you know, I don't agree with a lot of authors, but I love their books, and I don't agree with a lot of actors, but I love their movies. Somewhere along the way, we lost that separation of author and creative work, and it's just this massive trend now to crap all over whatever got you popular in the first place. So I'm not surprised there's this article by Games Workshop. I can hardly believe it, but I'm not surprised that they're trashing the Imperium. Why? And of course, you know, it's not just the Imperium. Every faction in 40K is just bad.
Yep, I linked it in the the private chat as well. The Imperium is driven by hate. Warhammer is not.
Yeah. My understanding, Flash Gordon, Emperor Ming was bad because he wasn't breastfed.
Unless he's Asian, like Alan Ning, then you had to feed him rice. Did I say that?
The Tower arguably good in 40K, but it's like sort of like, you know, a sort of a cult mentality. It's for the good of all, right?
That and the controlled genocide of occasional human populations.
Sometimes, yeah, you know. But of all the factions, they propose to be good for the greater good.
Wow. Wow.
Why didn't they pick on them? Genocide seems a lot worse than what the Space Marines did.
May I ask a normie question?
Go for it.
Are you still in it?
Go on.
Are you guys at all optimistic, cautiously optimistic on anything that Cavill is doing behind the scenes, or that he's attached? His excitement and also his kind of his motivation to keep things honest in regards to IPs and the fans?
I am, at least. Like, I may be blue-eyed and naive, and I've been accused of that, and provably so on many occasions. But Cavill seems like a guy who does actually give a shit about the integrity and the quality of the products that he works with. And if that passion can translate into the wider piece of entertainment, then I am hopeful. But again, it depends on how many other people he's going to have to work with.
I'm excited. I mean, look, he advocated on set during The Witcher to be truer to the source material, and he walked from the show, right? So why would he then go around and join another show where he wasn't promised some more creative freedom, perhaps? So that is speculation, of course, but that is hopeful because you know, otherwise you're just walking from one problem to the other. And he's a huge 40K nerd. He's a huge 40K fan. So you know, I'm very interested to see what happens with that. But if they start, you know, down this road of trying to erase the past and destroy the older lore, I think he's going to be very frustrated, and B, people are really not going to watch it.
It could also, I want to point out here too, real quick, it could be something incredibly dangerous for Games Workshop. Now, that's why they might actually give him a lot more creative control. Because Games Workshop has an enormous amount of street cred with the nerds. If he comes out and denounces the project, that would be devastating for them. And he could very well use that as kind of a nuclear option, like, no, we're going to do this, otherwise I can't stand behind it.
There is history of Amazon letting productions do their own thing. We're not talking about the Rangs of Wrong, you know, and when they do, those TV series, sorry about the dog, those TV shows tend to be really good. And but again, it's the less that Amazon creatives have their hands in it, the better it is. So I'm hoping that too as well, fellas.
But on the other hand, you got this. This is a tweet, but it has a quote from Aaron Dembski-Bowden, who I believe is the lead narrative designer, basically the fluff lore behind 40K. And what he's talking about here is he's saying that they tried, you know, they wanted to change the lore, but they were told from the previous IP overlords, i.e. the original creators, that there are no female custodian models. They're all males, so don't write any female ones. So they got vetoed twice trying to do this. But this is exactly the progressive reactionary activist force that's in a position of power in Games Workshop that's pushing for this change now. And if they have any sway over Amazon, and I have reasons to believe that they don't, because just from my experience on the Warcraft movie, it was very hard for the IP holder to get any creative say in the movie, although they did eventually, and that's why the movie was made for Warcraft. But if this guy has any sway over it, I think you're going to see the Amazon series polluted. So time will tell.
Yes, Adam Dembski-Bowden is one of the Black Library writers. They have a huge publishing arm, which is Black Library. Every single one of their writers is progressive as hell. I've even gotten access to a little writ that they have on their back end where they explain what they can and can't talk about on Twitter, for example. Nothing right-wing whatsoever on threat of being fired. And no mentioning of any unwanted individuals within 40K. I'm mentioned by name on their lists.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not surprised somehow.
So
it's
yeah,
always the
writers,
writing team.
all progressive.
It's always coming from the writing team, and even they're not the people who actually make the rules and the miniatures and everything else. And it you know, I was thinking about putting an infograph showing the amount of DEI dumpster fire by department, and I think you have the least in programming, and you seem to have the most in community management,
Yes.
and in writing. And by the way, community managers on the official Warhammer account on Twitter are currently blocking anyone who is questioning why they're doing this lore change with custodies. And this is exactly not the way to handle a public relations problem when you have one. Their tweet on custodies is over 2 million impressions right now, and they are handling it very poorly.
Well, they've got to delete it, because if they don't, what they have to bring to their corporate overlords eventually, because this is almost 98% guaranteeably the community management team and smaller entities within GW who have either done it by themselves or told the tops, oh, no, this is totally popular. If they come to them with page after page after page of tweets going, you lied, you lied, you lied, you lied, this is not the law, you lied, you lied, you lied, that is going to cause a lot of problems. So they need to do damage control now.
This is why I talk about community managers, because most people don't understand that the developers of video games and the developers of these tabletop games, they don't interact directly with the community. In fact, sometimes they're told not to, and they're too busy making the game. So as an exec, I relied on my community team to tell me what was going on with the community. I would get reports of the top 10 issues, you know, every week and daily if there was a specific fire. If you have activists in those positions, if you have people, and I've shown so many community managers that are just flagrantly political, even about their own game in their personal tweets. If you have people in those positions, they have zero incentive to forward that as the accurate picture of what the community is. What they'll say instead is it's just a couple of trolls and their sock puppet accounts, and all led by Grums, who we all know and would hate. And so you shouldn't listen to them at all.
Well, you
and
also have a DDoS server in your basement, right?
Oh yeah, they claimed that I DDoSed a website, but if you actually, but people found the receipts, the site was never attacked, and was never down for a significant amount of time, and yet this is still the common quote unquote knowledge.
Completely ruins the rumors I've been trying to spread.
Ah, well, that's it. Yeah, no tea with you.
Darn.
But yeah, well, tell me, how much influence does this narrative writer at Black Library, is Black Library part of Games Workshop now? Did they buy them, or were they a subsidiary? What is that relationship, and how much influence can this writer have?
Well, Black Library, I'll put a link in there. It's owned by Games Workshop. It is their own publishing arm. They release all 40K literature stuff, and there's a lot of it. There are uncountable volumes of tomes in the Black Library, including audiobooks. And including 40K for children, by the way, because, yeah, that was something we needed.
I did a quick look. He's got like 30 published novels under Black Library. I didn't see any credits in the game lore, though. You know, the actual rulebook fluff. For those who don't know, the Games Workshop books have excellent fluff, and it's usually like 2/3 of the book is all fluff, and then the rules make up a very small portion of the core rulebook. And I'd be interested to know if he's credited in that, or if he's really just kind of more of an outsider on the writing and novel arm of it, and he's trying to influence the core game.
He is not a rules writer, but he probably does have significant influence, because the writers for Black Library are, well, see, back in the day, there's actually still, I believe, an open submission form where you can send in anything you want to Black Library, and they might consider publishing it. Because back in the day, this was actually a fan-driven business. But there are relatively few big Black Library names. There's Adam Dembski Bounston, Graham McNeil, people like that. I believe these people do have a tremendous amount of influence within it just because they've created so much of the lore surrounding it. When Graham McNeil writes something, for example, I think, in fact, he's been credited with several lore innovations like glow globes or lumen globes. He invented that. Promethium, he invented that. Stuff like that. And these people are undoubtedly listened to by the upper management stuff. And it's also just the fact that their politics are in vogue right now. So their precise level of influence, I can't say. But I'd be very surprised if it was nothing.
Well, what started this was the 10th edition Codex rules for the Custodes is about to come out, and there have been leaks. And in one of those leaks, there is a large short story, and I hear it's very well written, about a female Custodes. And that sounds like something that could have come from the writing department, obviously, for sure.
Oh, wow, by the way, my mistake. Dan Abnett was the one who invented Promethium.
That sounds better. Abnett, I think Abnett is more old school.
Yep.
And he writes some excellent novels.
Yeah, Dan Abnett, he also is familiar to many who don't even know it. He's the one who wrote the seminal run on Guardians of the Galaxy, the one which inspired the movie. That was Dan Abnett. He also wrote the miniseries Punisher Year One, which inspired the 2004 movie, partially. So he's
a fantastic writer.
Author writer for a perfect fit for something like Warhammer.
Abnett is a great writer, and he too, personal account, very progressive, but he always manages to keep it out of his writing, which I respect tremendously.
Yeah, I've read a bunch of Abnett's novels, and I didn't detect any DEI. No DEI detected in Abnett novels. So yeah, fine, separate it if you can. Everyone's entitled to your opinion, but you got to stay true to the lore and what made the franchise popular and what built the fan base. It's reckless for these companies to go and try to retcon this stuff and try to destroy the past. If they want to take it in a new direction, why not invent new stuff? I never get this. It's always about destroying the past.
Well, that's the interesting thing, actually, because the word retcon, right? If they were actually retconning it, people would be more fine with it, because at least then they would have the courage of their convictions, as I said earlier, right? If they came out, okay, we've changed this lore, because we did it because we were inclusive, our investors, blah, 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 whatever, right? But they didn't. They outright lied about it. That's the tweet you pointed out, right? Where they say, like, oh, no, there has always been female Custodes. No, there hasn't. We know this. Why are you lying?
Oh, yeah. It's the total gaslighting. And here's the reply I made directly to, Games Workshop and Warhammer, where I showed that in 1987, when the Adeptus Custodes were first introduced in the Rogue Trader rule set, they say they are men, right? And in as recently as I think 2017, 2018, when the 7th and 8th edition codexes came out, they refer to them as the Brotherhood of Demigods, and that they are sons recruited from nobility. So this is just straight up gaslighting when they say that the Adeptus Custodes were always female, and that's just not true at all. And I haven't been blocked yet by them, strangely enough. They're blocking other people pointing this stuff out.
Oh, give it time.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
you
in the next,
give them more than a few seconds to respond.
Yeah, maybe right after this stream, I'll get my surprise. But it's not just here. I mean, if you go through all the artwork in my principal pinned tweet, I went through and I did a little research here. If you look at when the Custodes were really rendered into art in their traditional gold armor, it's from the Horus Heresy card game, which was made by Saber which is a third-party studio, but obviously directed by Games Workshop. And yeah, right, that tweet right below that, where I've got the screen caps. I went through every Custodes card in the game, and the ones that depict Custodes without their helmet, they're all universally male. They have never been depicted as female in any of the artwork. So you have the text, and you have the tradition. You know, for Second Amendment rights, people will know what I'm talking about. Text and tradition. That's completely contradict the current community manager tweet by Games Workshop, and it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous to say that. Change the lore if you want, dig your own grave, lose all your customers, but don't try to gaslight us.
Yep. Personally, I'm happy they lied, because it proves malice, doesn't it? Like, you're not being honest with us. You're just being you're culturally captured now. Because this is how it has to be. They have to change the past. They can't acknowledge it.
Well,
you're right. It's absolutely malicious.
Apologizing to the left is the worst thing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
You can't apologize.
And so the only thing you can do is make sure that the past never happened.
Correct.
Yeah, so rewriting history. Courtesy of Bailey Gifford, BlackRock, and Vanguard.
It's a very Marxist thing to do, isn't it?
It is.
Oh,
it is one of their favorite pastimes.
Yeah, we had a situation in Toronto where, and it looks like it's going to continue, where the usual suspects freaked out over the name of one of our streets, and they're now changing the name because it should no longer represent this individual. And after some research, it turns out that this person was actually an abolitionist, not a slave owner. So
they don't care about that.
No, they made the decision that this person owned slaves, and now it turns out he was actually the opposite. But it's too late. The wheels,
the accusation has been made, and you are guilty upon accusation.
Yes, that's it. Done.
Yeah. Once you are credibly accused, that's their keyword, credibly accused.
I like it.
You are guilty upon accusation, and we can now act accordingly.
Yes, you are unmutual, according to the prisoner.
There didn't have to even be a reason to change the Custodes, because the Sisters of Silence, which was an early faction, were also permitted in the Emperor's Palace, and they were null psychers, and they were all female. My son just pointed this out, right? And he's a huge 40K lorehound, and they were I guess they were ejected at some point from the palace, probably for being psychers, which, you know, is a no-no. But they could have brought them back, and they were supposed to fight alongside the Adeptus Custodes, and they could have easily brought them back. We have Sisters of Battles too. Oh, my son is saying they were the ultimate psychic hunters. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you needed women, because who else would wash your clothes and make breakfast?
Well, I mean, psychers are a huge menace in the universe, and so you know, they would go out and hunt the most dangerous psychers, and they were sort of together with the Adeptus Custodes. They were like the right arm of the Emperor. And what's really interesting is that the Custodes are supposed to be the ultimate warrior, right? They are the height of perfection. They are tower over regular Space Marines. They are more perfect in every way than Space Marines themselves. So of course, the first one they decide to gender flip has to be better than men, and we have to put them in the Custodes, because then we got to show all the Space Marines they're inferior. That always happens too, every time.
This clip was taken from Midnight's Edge in the Morning, which streams live every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 9 AM Pacific Time on the Midnight's Edge main channel. There you can send in your live questions and comments before clips and full stream replays are uploaded to Midnight's Edge live archives. We are also on Twitter, Rumble, Odyssey and Facebook, so smash that like, help share, subscribe and join us.